everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad to have you crafting with me today. In today's video, we are going to be working on part 4 of our Fisherman's basket. Now, I will link all of the videos, including a most recent little short reel that I put together where I've added some, done some little bit of extra work on the side, not in a long form video. So I'll link the playlist and that additional little reel down below so that you can get all caught up, pun intended. And today, so as you can see, I've added some bits and pieces to that top flap, including some paper clips where we can tuck in some extra ephemera. And I also put together this little pull-out tackle journal in that short video. So do check that out so that you can see where we're up to. So in today's video, what I want to do is add in some little floating ephemera pieces to that top flap to tuck into those little paper clips. And we're going to do that in the form of a hand painted postcard. And in my mind, that's sort of fitting into our little narrative story that we're building for this journal, which is that, you know, maybe it's something our fisherman has picked up at a port or something, and then the little patch will be maybe something that he's had on a jacket or a hat or something, you know, just something cute to add. And I know what you're thinking. There's no way I'm going to be able to paint a painted nautical style postcard, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a cheeky hack that will absolutely improve your painting skills and will help you to add some really gorgeous hand painted pieces, ephemera, journal pages to whatever paper project you're working on. Now, as you can see, I've taken just a little flashcard there and attached it to the back of a piece out of, this is kind of a reasonably thick book page, but as you can see by the lighting there, it is kind of glossy. Now, I would recommend that you coat your glossy book pages in some clear gesso before starting a project like this. I didn't have any with me, so I skipped that step, but I would recommend it because it's just going to help the paint adhere to your glossy surfaces. And what we're doing is we're using this magazine image or this book page image or any photograph really to guide us into adding our own painting over the top. And this little cheeky hack is something that has helped me over the years to improve my own painting skills. Painting is something I'm much less comfortable with than drawing and using sort of dry materials to work with, like crayons and things. I find I have far less control when I'm painting, and sometimes it can be hard to just feel like you're accurate in your painting. And obviously water has so much movement, and it never looks the same twice, and it also depends on the light sources. So this way you can actually very easily, well, not super easily, but if you can color match, you're halfway there. So by looking at an image, if you can get tuned in with identifying the colors in the image and then mixing them as best you can. And as you can see here, I've used an ultramarine, an aqua, a white, and then a brown, which I know is kind of seems like a strange color to include in water, but trust me, it works. And then I've used a small brush to just dab the paint where it corresponds to the color in the image onto the surface there, and I'm just dabbing away. And the quicker you can work, the more easily you'll be able to blend those colors together as you go, and just dab away. Now, the other thing I couldn't do, which I would recommend, is take a photo of the photo so that you can reference back, because obviously once you start adding paint on top, and I want to sort of touch on working from dark to light as well, which I will in a moment. But as you keep building up layers of pigment onto your surface there, obviously you can't remember necessarily which colors were underneath. as you build them up, it can be tricky to remember. Now, I was recording this on my phone, but so I couldn't take a picture and then reference it back. But I would recommend taking a picture so that you can kind of keep referencing it as you go. Now, adding the brown down first did mean that I was able to build up darker colors to start and then work kind of from dark to light. So get your dark colors down first and then slowly add your lighter colors over top as you go. And then, you can blend in more of those darker blues. If you're working in a landscape where it was perhaps mountains or grassy hills and things like that, valleys, pick out the darkest parts of your image first, and then so maybe darker greens. In my case, the darkest parts of the image were those dark blues and then some browns, which I mixed in with the blue to sort of, pick up maybe where there's rocks under the surface of the water there, some sandbanks, and also obviously the depths of the water changes and becomes darker as it gets further out from shore. So that's where I've sort of popped down some of that darker ultramarine blue mixed in with the aqua. But just keep playing, keep building, and all of a sudden it will start to look like what it is you're trying to paint. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. The whole part of it looking like a hand-painted painting is that it looks hand-painted. And the less perfect, in my opinion, the better, because it's just going to add more character. But just keep playing, keep building. And if something doesn't look quite right, just add some more paint over top and let it dry. I was, in this case, going back in with a little tiny fine brush to add the little bits of sea foam and white areas of the image. But you certainly don't need any fancy artistic tools for this. And the other thing I would recommend too is don't clean your brushes necessarily in between all this color blending that you're doing, because that will help it look just that little bit more natural as you go. And your mind, it's very strange. Your mind fills in the blanks. So anywhere where it doesn't actually look quite right, and I'm certainly not saying that what I've painted today is any sort of masterpiece, but what your mind does is fill in the blanks. And so if it doesn't quite look right, your brain still knows that that's supposed to be water and that these are supposed to be like rocks or the shoreline. So even if your color matching isn't perfect, even if your lines aren't perfect and you're just splotching paint down, which is what I'm doing here, I'm certainly not employing any sort of fancy painting skills here. As I say, painting is one of my least, I would say, honed and refined artistic skills. Just splosh it down and your brain will all of a sudden, if you can color match decently well, as I say, your brain will fill in the blanks and will know, and the viewer will know that that's kind of what this is supposed to be. And oh gosh, I had fun with this painting. I just let my brain like wander around in these colors. And again, very, very simple color palette for this rock face here. So it was a fawn and a provincial beige, I think it was, my trusty Jo Sonja acrylic here. And just black. And then as you saw there, I sort of added in some more of those blue tones that I already had on my palette, and that's sort of reflecting some of those colors that our eye sees when we're getting reflections. So surfaces around large bodies of water can reflect some of those, especially if these rocks are wet. They're going to sort of pick up blues out of the ocean, blues out of the sky. So just keeping all those colors talking to each other as you just splosh them around on your surface. And then all of a sudden you have a hand-painted, quote unquote, image that you can add in to your journal pages. I mean, I just love this cheeky hack. It's going to help you recognize where your skills need work, but also how you see images when you flick through journals, picking out not journals, but books and things when you're trying to decide what little bits and pieces to add to your journals. Your brain will sort of start to look at how to frame things and what the composition is going to be. I'm obviously wanting to turn this into a faux postcard, but you certainly wouldn't have to. This could go into your journal as is, ready to go, as a little additional painting or piece of handmade ephemera to your page. So I'm going to kind of call it there with this painting. I'm going to call it done. And you know, I love to keep my paint swatches for future journaling or to include in my current journal, because I hate wasting even just the slightest bit of this beautiful paint. And so I put everything aside to dry here. But I was totally chuffed with how that turned out. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to look a little bit like water. And same goes for our patch here as we start on the second piece of mixed media ephemera here that I'm working on. I recently went to the Sunshine Coast for a little day and popped into an op shop and found this swatch of fabric, and it just kind of reminded me a little bit of like a nautical patch, vintage kind of style nautical patch that you would see on, you know, maybe a captain's jacket or hat or something. So I definitely wanted to include that somehow, and I had thought of maybe attaching it to at the front of the journal, but it ended up being just a bit big, so I'm going to just slide it into one of those paper clips, and I've cut around it obviously in a circle. Doesn't need to be a circle obviously, and obviously you don't need to do these next few steps if you're happy with your fabric as is, but I just wanted to add a little bit of touchy-feely texture to this patch. So I went around the outside, the perimeter there, with a blanket stitch in a beautiful kind of bright red fabric, picking up on some of the other tones that we've used in the journal. And then on the inside, a second layer of stitching. This is a back stitch in just plain white, and then I did decide at the last minute to add some back stitching just around the edge of the little cross there. And that just sort of gives it just that little bit more texture, makes it feel a little bit more handmade rather than just a printed piece of fabric. And then you knew it was coming, my trusty bare double-sided tape. We are going to turn this patch into a sticker, and I'm just laying the surface of the fabric straight down onto the sticky, or one of the sticky sides of our double-sided tape here. And I don't know what it is about like just adding something that's just that slightly different. I love paper. I love working with paper, and it is endless what you can do. And certainly this section here you could make entirely out of paper. You don't have to use fabric. But I do feel it gives that little bit more of an eclectic feel to your journals if you can bring in some different textures and different artistic practices by adding some sewing. It doesn't have to be good sewing. It can, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be fancy. This is what I always say. You don't have to be fancy with your skills. Just get it down on the page and have fun, have the best time. So chipping away here, and we are doing some true junk journaling here with a takeaway paper bag. Obviously it didn't have any oil on it. It was nice and clean. And I just thought this mustard color kind of reminded me a little bit of like a Wes Anderson style nautical color. I don't know. Let me know what you think. If you saw these colors together, would you think nautical, or what would you think? And I did have the thought while I was watching this back that I probably could have actually sewed the patch directly onto this paper surface. Obviously it's a little bit more strenuous, but it actually probably would have been a bit slightly less fiddly if I'd done that. And certainly that's something you could do. So bear that in mind. If your paper isn't too thick and it's not going to cause you too much stress, you could have just sewed directly onto the paper. The back of this though was nice and smooth once I put that fabric sticker down onto it. So bear that in mind too, that actually then, had we sewed directly onto the paper, the back probably wouldn't have gone on as easily with just glue. I probably would have had to use my double-sided tape to stick that all the way down. Now our little narwhal who's going to feature on our postcard today, this paper, front and back, was from Bespoke Letterpress. So you might know those. They're a company all over Australia. They do beautiful thick wrapping papers, and I of course saved some. This one was like a whale print on the front, and then a sort of little navy anchor print on the back. So the little scraps to the right of frame there are leftovers from where I fussy cut all the whales out of the paper, and I couldn't bring myself to discard the scraps. So I thought this was a great way to use up some of those. And the vintage flash card that you see there, I've just you could have left the text, but I just sort of thought it was a nice way to add some more collage to the back there. And oh my goodness, another thought I had while watching this footage back, and sometimes you just don't think of things in the moment. You sort of have an idea of what you're doing and you just sort of carry on. But I did sort of feel like maybe I could have made this a bit of an interactive postcard by leaving his tail attached and folding it under. So in a way, I kind of wish I'd done that. I do end up slicing it off, but imagine if his tail might have folded up underneath the postcard and I'd put just some backing on it. Or it wouldn't have even needed backing actually, because the back of him is that anchor paper. So in hindsight, I kind of wish I'd left his tail attached. It's funny, isn't it? Like, these things can just go on and on. But I did use my little typo stickers there to add a little phrase that he's telling you, which is, I wish you were here. Just seemed to fit well, and I did pick a kind of complementary color for the text there that sort of fits in with our little narwhal. But with that is done. And another top tip that I kind of wish I had employed was to put a little coating over the painting just so it didn't scratch when I tucked it under these paper clips here. The paper clips are quite sharp, so maybe adding some clear gesso or some sort of coating over the top of that painting would just seal it down and make it a bit more color fast as you interact with the components. But that's going to do it for this video. I really hope you've enjoyed this little cheeky painting hack and working with me today in part 4 of this basket. My next video will be part 5, and that will be the final installation for this journal, and we will be making one last little pull out to go down the bottom there as you open the journal. In the meantime, I want to wish you a very happy crafting, and thank you so very much for watching, and I will see you then. Bye bye.